And to me, at least, I think playoff expansion is a win-win for both the fans and for the league. And here's why. First of all, if you just look at it on its face, right? Obviously, you expand the playoffs, so now more teams have a chance to make the playoffs, which, if you want to say that waters down the season, I would hear you. I would disagree, but I hear at least your argument. And look at the NBA. Part of the reason why people and fans really don't lock into the NBA outside of around Christmas time is really around this time once the playoffs start heating up and once you have the final month, few weeks of the playoff race, is because there's not much parity in the NBA, right? You have the teams at the top. You have the top 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that are, fighting for seeding. And then you have the teams at the bottom where you normally, these last few years, you've had 7, 8 seeds make the playoffs that are under 500, really have no chance. And their best hope, I guess you could say, is win one game, right? Just not get swept in the first round by whoever the number 1 seed is to the number 2 seed. So there's really not much excitement once it goes to the playoff race in the NBA comes down the stretch, and really once the first round of the playoff hits, because some of these matchups are so lopsided that it's really not fair. But the NFL, this is different. So at least to me, first of all, right off the bat, you look at adding an extra team, so many more games now have importance going down the stretch. Right? This is not the NBA where a lot of fans tune out the last month, or tune out until the last month, I should say, of the regular season, or maybe even, if you're a fan of a team that's really good, or at least clinch a playoff spot, maybe you will coast and tune out the last 2 or 3 weeks and then gear back up once the playoffs start. Now you add extra importance because now all of a sudden an extra team. So now by allowing an extra team, you give an extra 2 or 3 teams that are still fighting for that playoff spot a chance and hope when it comes December that they will still have a chance to make the playoffs. And what does more meaningful games mean? All of a sudden now you have better ratings in more markets, attendance is higher, and merchandise sales is higher because now you have fan bases believing their team can make the playoffs. And maybe, if there was only a 16 playoff and they're the 8th, the team right now is in 8th place, yeah, your hopes are slim, I should say. And, maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks you're not into it. As a Colts fan, I can attest to this 100% this just past year. The Colts had a great start to the year. They start 5-2. Really get my hopes up. I think they can win the division, let alone make the playoffs. They have a pretty horrid second half of the year, including a terrible month of December, to where they're eliminated from the playoffs. They lost a Thursday night game in Houston, and I believe with 2 games left, that was basically the nail in their coffin. Their season was over. And I can't lie, the last 2 games I paid attention, I watched, but I'll just say I was more interested by other games going on. I was more interested by my fantasy team. I had other games to look forward to, I should say, outside of watching the Colts play the Panthers and outside of the Colts playing the Jaguars. I just wasn't into it. But now, all of a sudden, you add an extra team in, I'm back in, because now the Colts aren't eliminated as early, and a team like the Colts, that is, let's say, 7-7, let's say, going into the last 2 weeks of the year, they have more of a chance to be in it than they were in the past. And unlike the NBA, I don't think letting an extra team on the bottom in waters down the playoffs at all. Now, Ian Rappaport did some great research. So as he said, because the last time the playoffs were expanded was back in 1990. So he said if this format was instituted back in 1990, so 30 years of evidence and data, to where if they had 14 teams in the playoffs starting in 1990, so there'd be 60 extra playoff teams, just one of those 60 extra playoff teams that would make the playoffs have a losing record. Just one. So I know that is, obviously you see in the NBA, that is a big, that hurts the playoffs, I should say, because you have these teams regularly in the 7-8 seeds that are under 500. The NBA can't expand the playoffs because they're only allowing more bad teams in, and there's already enough bad teams that make the playoffs as is. The NFL, that's not the case. Think about that. 1 out of 60 teams, if you were to expand the playoffs going back 30 years, would have made the playoffs with a losing record. We've already seen right now the playoffs as is. You had a 7-9 Seahawks team not only make the playoffs, win the division, have a home playoff game, and win that playoff game. They beat the Saints, who were 11-5. It was 10 years ago, when you had Marshawn Lynch have that viral run where he it felt like 1 million tackles, hold his junk going into the end zone. That play will live in NFL history. That team was 7-9 that year, and they won a playoff game. So it's different to the fact that where you have an average NFL team, but the way the NFL schedule works, the way the NFL playoffs, when it's just one game, these teams have chances. You're not watering it down to where basically you're allowing the 7th seed Now, basically, you're giving them a free invitation to whoever the number 2 seed is to roll over them. That's not the case. We just saw this past playoffs. You had the Tennessee Titans be the last team in as the 6th seed. What did they do? They went into New England, a notoriously hard place to win, let alone in the regular season, in the playoffs. They go in there, they beat Tom Brady, they beat Bill Belichick in Gillette Stadium. An impossible task as the last team in the playoffs as the 6th seed. Then they go and do one-up themselves, beating the overall number 1 seed in the Ravens, with the MVP at quarterback in Lamar Jackson, a 14-2 team in Baltimore. They go and win. So the NFL already has enough parity to where once you make the dance, once you're in the tournament, you have a legitimate chance. The Titans got hot at the right time. They went to the AFC Conference Championship game. And they got through 2 tough teams in the Patriots, where it's impossible to win in their stadium, and the Ravens, who had the best season by far of any team in the NFL last year. So it's possible that whoever the 7th seed is next year can absolutely win a playoff game or 2 and get hot and really make some noise. Now, not to mention, too, I just talked about how, if you expand this format, you're only allowing 1 team out of 60 that would have had a losing record. Well, not just that. So not only are you not adding bad teams, you're adding good teams. If you go back just 10 years, going back to 2010, if they put this playoff bracket and allowed an extra team, so allowed 7 teams in each conference in since 2010, 5 teams would have made the playoffs with 10 wins. Think about that. 5 teams last year, and there were 6 teams total. One was an 8 seed, so one year you had a really good conference. But you would have had 5 extra teams that make the playoff with 10 wins. So the undeserving teams aren't the ones that are going to be benefiting from this extra playoff spot. It's going to be teams that maybe got off to a slow start. Maybe you're in a really tough division. Let's say like the Rams. The Rams last year were the 7th seed. They were the first team out. They were in the division last year with the 49ers and the Seahawks, who their game, Week 17, was a battle for the number 1 seed in the NFC. They both were so good last year. And you had the Rams there in 3rd place, who were 9-7. Had a pretty, definitely disappointing year. But they were no slouch. They weren't terrible. And they would have got in last year. So the undeserving teams aren't the ones getting in. The deserving teams are, like I said, since 2010, so 10 years, you go 10 years back, 5 extra teams with 10 wins would have made the playoffs. This was instituted 10 years ago. But it doesn't just benefit those on the bottom, right? Those fighting for the last playoff spot or 2. This also benefits the fans in the league for those who root for teams are at the top. Now think about it, right? You have, since with this new format being instituted, not only are allowing an extra playoff team in, or an extra team in the playoffs, in, you're also eliminating 1 bye. Meaning you have 7 teams, only the top seed in each conference has a first round bye. And why? So now, with that only top team getting a bye, you're forcing teams to play their hardest through Week 17, no matter if the division is clinched, no matter if they have a stranglehold on the conference, because they have to make sure they get that number 1 seed to get that bye. Right? You had the Ravens last year sit Lamar Jackson and sit a lot of their stars in Week 17 because they had everything locked up. Now, some teams will be able to do that. If you have a great year like the Ravens did, we go 14-2, you have the number 1 seed locked up heading into Week 17, you can still do that. But a lot of these teams don't. And again, as you saw with the Seahawks or the 49ers last year, that game on Sunday Night Football to end the regular season was for that number 1 spot. Now that top seed gets all the more important because now all of a sudden that's the only spot guaranteed to get a bye. And why is it so important to get a bye? Because if you go back 10 years, the last 10 years of Super Bowl matchups, so you have 20 teams to make the Super Bowl. 17 of the 20 teams to make the Super Bowl in the past decade had a bye, had a first-round bye in the playoffs. So they're either the number 1 or the number 2 seeds. 17 out of 20. That shows how important it is to get a bye and how much it helps you when you have to play 2 playoff games and at least one is at home if you're a 2 seed, depending on how it goes. And now this year, or going forward, I should say, obviously you get the number 1 seed, you get home field advantage. So it is very, very, very important to get that bye to, first of all, rest. You save yourself from playing 1 extra game. You get home field advantage. You get to watch your opponent how they play, how they played the last week, how to scout them. And especially, this is going to get even more important in a few years once they go to a 17-game regular season. Because guess what? They're not adding a second bye. All they're doing is tacking on an extra game at the end of the season. So guess what happens? Teams will be even more banged up. Teams will be even more hurt. And now that bye even becomes more important than it already is, because more than just, again, saving yourself from playing an extra game, you need that week off to give players a rest. Just have them juiced up for the playoffs. This bye becomes all the more important. So now, not only, again, are you helping teams from the bottom drum up some more excitement and some more interest for those teams fighting for that 7th seed now instead of the 6th seed, you're forcing teams at the top who had great years that are, let's say, 13-2 with 1 game to go, or 14-1, or 12-2, let's say 12-2 with 2 games to go. You are forcing them to still play as hard as possible because they need to get that bye. And every game honestly truly matters. You will rarely see players sit in the final week of the season, especially if that number 1 seed is not clinched. So now you give teams at the bottom a chance to watch relevant football, and now teams at the top can't just coast through the end of the season, coast the last game or two. They have to play hard and full until the final regular season is all over. So at least to me, I don't see how this hurts either the fans or the league. Excitement is going to be higher. There's more football to watch, better football to watch. Not just more football, I should say, because I made the argument that at least a 17-game regular season, I believe this, will hurt the product on the field. It will hurt games because training camp will be less physical, and because now teams are going to basically try to be as safe as possible, especially that first month of the year is basically going to become preseason. Because no one's going to really hit, no one's going to play hard in training camp. They're going to save themselves for the regular season. And that first month, a lot of teams will be working out the kinks and trying to get back into football shape when the regular season is going on, when games actually matter. So I'm not a big fan of just more football for more football's sake. I'm not. But I am a fan of more football that's good football and important football. I'm all in on that. So you expand the playoffs, you give one team each conference an extra chance to make the playoffs. To me, it doesn't water it down because you still have good teams making the playoffs. Teams have a chance. Like you go back 10 years, 4 wildcard teams have at least made it to the conference championship. And the 6th seed in the Packers 10 years ago win the Super Bowl. So it's not outlandish to say that whoever's the last team in has no chance. Again, we just saw the Titans just this past year go all the way to the conference championship game. And at least for the first half, go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. So at least to me, again, it hurts the bottom of the bracket. It helps, the bottom of the bracket, and it helps the top of the bracket. So I don't see how there is a downside for the league or for the fans. So I'll get your thoughts. I know, whether you're a fan of the extra game, and I'd love to get your thoughts. Are you a fan of an extra playoff game? Do you think it waters it down? I know there are fans that with the extra playoff game think it actually hurts the regular season. Now the regular season is not as important because, almost half the league makes the playoffs, so who really cares? Right, 28 of the 32 teams will make the playoffs now with this new format. So you go from less than half to, oh boy, I'm trying to do some quick math here. Still less than half. Oh my goodness gracious. Holy cow. I apologize for that last 10 seconds you guys had to hear. As you can see, math is not a strength of mine. I was not a math major in school. But still, some people think that the regular season is watered down by extra playoff games. I do not. I think it only helps the regular season, helps the playoffs. It helps fans for both the bottom and the top. I think this is a win-win for the league and for the fans.